Hello, and welcome to the League of Women Voters Forum for Magisterial District Judge for the municipalities of Aspinwall, Blawnox, Fox Chapel, Indidana, O'Hara, and Sharpsburg. My name is Chris Berger. I'm a Vice President of the League of Women Voters of Greater Pittsburgh, and I'll be moderating this forum. This forum is being conducted via teleconference and will be streamed in its entirety on the League's Facebook page and YouTube channel on Monday, May 3rd at 8 p.m. This forum is the property of the League of Women Voters of Greater Pittsburgh. The Magisterial District Judge represents the first rung in PA's legal system and is responsible for dealing with a variety of offenses ranging from traffic violations, theft, landlord-tenant disputes, to more serious issues like protection from abuse or significant crimes that must be sent to the Court of Common Pleas. They also decide when to authorize search warrants and can perform marriages. Candidates for this position are allowed to cross-file in Pennsylvania, but are not required to. So you may see the same candidates on the Democratic and Republican ballots. The primary this year will be Tuesday, May 18th. You can check your registration and eligibility to vote by going to the state's website, www.votespa.com. A few specifics before we begin today's forum. We are going to have about 60 minutes to ask questions, and each candidate will give a closing remark. Names were drawn prior to the forum to determine the order in which the candidates will speak. Each candidate will have a chance to answer each question, with each person having 1 minute to respond. There will be no time for rebuttals. If a candidate wishes to respond to another candidate's statement, they must use time from the next question. I will be asking the questions in a rotating manner, so each candidate will have a chance to be the first to answer a question. Questions have been gathered from a variety of sources, including Fox Chapel area high school students in Jen Klein's advanced placement, U.S. government and politics classes. All the questions have been reviewed for relevance to the position being sought, duplication, clarity, and civility. Candidates' answers will be timed, and the candidates will be advised when their time is expired. Although, if time is expired, you will be allowed to complete your sentence. Please remember that these candidates are your friends and your neighbors who have stepped forward to serve their community. Now let's introduce the candidates. The candidates for this forum are Matthew Rudsky, David Turner, Megan Sasanowski, Barry Wingard, and Jessica Lynch. So the first question will go to Mr. Rudsky. Please tell us about your qualifications and why you are running for this office.
Hi, how are you today? Thank you for hosting us to the League and to all of the candidates and to everyone who'll be watching. I am Matt Rudsky. I'm an Aspinwall-based general practice attorney. I've been practicing in Aspinwall since 2013. We represent our neighbors and community members in countless courts, magistrate courts, courts of common pleas, and administrative bodies. Magistrates are fundamentally community-based judges. They are our neighbors, solving problems for our neighbors. And I have been doing that quite literally and figuratively from my doorstep as the mayor of Sharpsburg and prior to that as a counselor. Over the course of the last year, we have had a rotating group of senior judges coming into our community because we haven't had a magistrate, our former magistrate retired. And it's really heightened in me the sense of how important it is to have a local person in this role, someone who knows the people, knows the communities, and knows the players.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, same question to you.
Hello, thank you. Sorry for that delay. My name is Dave Turner. I am an O'Hara resident. I have a wonderful wife and 3 children who attend Kerr Elementary School. I have grown up in Fox Chapel and lived out of this district for the entirety of 4 years when I was all the way over in Oakland attending the University of Pittsburgh. I've been very involved in the community all my life. The first 15 years of my adulthood I spent working for the Fox Chapel Volunteer Fire Department. I graduated from Pitt Law School and worked for the better part of a decade in law firms downtown, handling complex and statewide, sometimes nationwide litigation. I've also become a teacher in the last 8 years, and that's something I'm hoping to talk about today. I've taught in all of the Fox Chapel schools, and now I teach in the city schools of Pittsburgh, which I think will be very relevant to our conversation today.
Thank you. Mrs. Sasanowski?
Hello, good morning. Thank you all for hosting us and for taking the time to pay attention to this local race. My name is Megan Sasanowski, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my experience and commitment. That's why I'm running for this position, because I want to put my experience and my commitment to work for a community that I love. I'm a lifelong O'Hara resident. I'm living in the house I grew up in with my family. I went to Carnegie Mellon for undergrad. I earned a Bachelor of Science in Economics. From there, I proceeded on to the University of Pittsburgh Law School. After that, and currently, I'm working as an assistant district attorney here in Allegheny County. My area of specialty, the lion's share of the cases I've handled there, are all domestic violence cases. They all begin at the magistrate office. A magisterial district judge handles 90% of their cases are summary traffic violations, summary violations, and criminal preliminary hearings. I have literally done countless of those cases. I'd like to put my experience to work in a community that I'm a part of and I'm proud to be from.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard?
Hi, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for having this forum today. I think it's very important that we have more dialogue when it comes to these sorts of issues, and I look forward to the debate we're going to have today. My name is Barry Wingard. I've been a military person. I have 30 years in the military, 15 Army, 15 years Air Force. I was a Judge Advocate General in the Air Force. I've been a practicing attorney downtown Pittsburgh for 25 years. 20 years I've been a public defender. During that time, I've worked in the pretrial division, which is basically doing every magistrate in Allegheny County. I've worked the adult trial division. I've worked juvenile division for several years. I've worked in mental health court and veterans court, which I currently work in. I've also worked in Phoenix court, ARD court. Basically, there's no court that I haven't done. I look forward to bringing that skill and knowledge to the folks of the Fox Chapel Area School District. And I look forward to talking to you about my vision for the future, because it's about you. It's not about me so much. It's about what I can bring for you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Lynch?
Hello, and thank you to the League of Women Voters, as well as Ms. Klein's class and all of our citizens, residents, neighbors, and friends who are joining us to hear about the candidates. My name is Jessica Lynch, and I graduated law school in 1992, 29 years ago this very week. Since then, I have practiced in Pennsylvania. I took the Pennsylvania bar, and I've been in local, state, and federal courts as a litigator. I've had a diverse number of assignments in civil law as well as in criminal law. I've represented protection from abuse victims, and I've worked with criminal justice advisory reform groups. And my main specialty of late has been as an arbitrator in landlord-tenant court. I am a certified conflict resolution specialist, and I've done all this while raising 2 children through the Fox Chapel area high school system. One is graduated, one is still in college now. I've managed my home, which occasionally is very messy because I'm out in the community doing many things with many organizations around our neighborhoods, making the world a better place. Thank you again for having us and joining us tonight.
And thank you. The next question, Mr. Turner, you will answer this first. Since all candidates have law degrees and experience in the court, what do you believe is the most important quality that a magisterial judge should have that separates you from other qualified candidates?
Well, thank you for that. I actually believe that I bring something very different, which is my teaching background. And I think I get the sense that I'm viewing this position as a very different opportunity than my fellow candidates. And it's not a criticism, it's just because of where I've come from. I've taught in all the schools in Fox Chapel. I've taught in 2 city schools where there are children who have faced a great deal of trauma. And what I've learned from working with children who face trauma is that punishment one time, if that's your only interaction with them, leads to the belief that you're part of the problem and not part of the solution. So what I'd like to bring from my personal experience is making this job just as much about outside of the courtroom as inside of the courtroom, to work on regularly following up with people who've had bad outcomes in the court, to try to problem solve with them and try to make it so with my personal help, after the cases are no longer pending, they won't come to court the second time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Sazanowski?
I think the most important quality a magisterial district judge can bring to this job is practical experience in the courtroom. As I said, over 90% of what a magisterial district judge hears are summary violations that are criminal, summary traffic violations, and criminal preliminary hearings. That's 90% of the docket. I have all of those experiences. I've handled countless numbers of those exact type of cases in front of almost every district judge in Allegheny County. There are 46 of them. And I've seen a whole lot of things about what not to do. And unfortunately, sometimes you witness things that you shouldn't do in terms of dealing with those kinds of cases and dealing with people in the community. Another issue that magisterial district judges handle are search warrants. In the course of my employment as an assistant district attorney, where I've protected victims of domestic violence and handled those types of cases, I've reviewed search warrants. I've reviewed probably hundreds of search warrants before they're even presented to a district judge for their approval. And I'd be able to bring all of that practical experience to work.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard, same question to you.
Thank you. I believe the most important thing that a person can bring to the magisterial district is the fact that, experience. And experience I have in spades. I've been a practicing attorney, litigator in Allegheny County for 25 years. I've been a public defender for 20 years. I've worked in all the diversionary specialty courts. And what I hope to do is to bring to the magisterial district court the possibility of a mental health court review and a veterans court review. Currently, I work in mental health and veterans court, and I work with the VJOs in the veterans court, and I work with JRS in mental health court. And what I want to bring to our magisterial district is a caring court that's going to be able to get the assessments done at the magisterial district, have JRS come in, have a service plan drawn up, and try to retain as many cases as we can at the magisterial district. For those cases, which is going to save a lot of money for the taxpayers of the Fox Chapel area. In those cases that we can't keep at the magisterial district, those will go downtown, but they will already be prepared for the formal arraignment to go into those specialty courses when they get downtown. And that's what I want to bring, experience and knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch, same question to you.
Thank you. What I think the magisterial district judge needs to have is maturity and good judgment. And with that comes integrity and commitment and all of the values, certainly that I possess. I am not a niche practitioner. I've not just done prosecution or just defense. I've done it across the board. And along the way, again, with my years of experience, that has brought me to learn and to see beyond just the immediate issues presented. You have to have the maturity to be able to apply the judgment and understand what the issues might be, as well as the ethics and integrity to back it up. Certainly from a practice area, we're going to see a landlord-tenant explosion of cases once the eviction moratorium ends. And there you need to have, again, not just the experience and the ability to apply good judgment, but you have to have an understanding of what the issues might be and how there can be practical solutions to solving that crisis that we're about to face. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rutsky?
Yes, thank you. I think the most important quality for a magistrate is just sense of community. The Fox Chapel Area School District is a very diverse community socioeconomically. There's a wide range of individuals that come from our community. Because it's diverse, you have to have a thorough understanding. As a local elected official, I've been boots on the ground, finger on the pulse, and I've learned what works and what doesn't work. And I think that's what distinguishes me from the other candidates. We are all lawyers. We all have courtroom experience, a wide breadth of knowledge, and we've been working for all extended periods of time. But really what it comes down to is magistrates are our neighbors, and they're solving problems for neighbors. So knowing what works and what doesn't work is important, whether it's a traffic matter or a code enforcement matter or a preliminary hearing on a misdemeanor or a felony. Having that wide breadth of knowledge and applying it to your community and your neighbors is what's most important.
Thank you. The next question, Ms. Sazanowski will answer. And if any candidate needs me to repeat the question, just please ask and I will be glad to repeat it. Please describe a case or situation in the courtroom you were involved in that you believe tested your temperament and patience, and how did you handle it?
Sure. In handling domestic violence cases at the preliminary hearing level in front of a magisterial district judge, I do recall, without getting into any specific details, without violating that person's trust, I do recall a situation where I dealt with a victim who had been in front of this exact same district judge in multiple times. She at that time was not willing to cooperate with prosecution, contrary to her personal safety. And there were many people in that room that recognized that. The Magisterial District judge at that time recognized that. And, in prior dealings, after seeing that time and again, was frustrated, was a little annoyed, and let a little bit of that show. In my view, that some of that was inappropriate. People are only human. I do understand that, but if I were to be a district judge, I would meet people at their level. I recognize that not everybody is in a position where they're willing to cooperate at that level. And these are our friends and neighbors, and I'd be willing to work with people exactly where they're at and get them the help they deserve.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard, same question to you.
Clearly, probably the most frustrating situation I've ever had was working in the Office of Military Commissions in Guantanamo Bay. I was assigned as a colonel to go and do military commissions in the Pentagon down in Washington, D.C. And my responsibility was I had to fly to Guantanamo Bay. I had 8 individuals that were being indefinitely detained, which basically stood for the proposition that under no circumstance could they ever be released. So what I had to do is I had to lead an investigation team to go to Afghanistan, to go to Iraq, to go to Saudi Arabia. We had to go and we had to reconstruct these allegations against these individuals in such a way that we dispelled every single element that the United States government had against each of these individuals. And when we did that, the frustrating thing came in is that they completely shifted their story. They withdrew the charges against our clients, and then they never refiled the charges, but they had to remain in Guantanamo Bay for an additional 4 years. But I'm glad to report all 8 are home now. They regularly WhatsApp me. They're all starting families and they're all doing quite well, but it was extremely frustrating. Indefinite detention is never the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch?
Thank you. So 2 cases immediately come to mind. One is I was representing a plaintiff in a protection from abuse case, and as part of the process, I'm obligated to talk with the defendant and see if there's perhaps a civil consent arrangement that we can reach to avoid the burden of the court process. And I was in the courthouse and I was toe to toe with this defendant who was much bigger and very intimidating and constantly threatened me and tried actually helped prove my case, right? He was engaging in threatening behavior in a PFA manner, but I was certainly not intimidated by him and worked around what the issues were, had to really get underneath the surface and demonstrated the patience there. Similarly, right now I have a landlord-tenant case where I'm representing indigent tenants who are not happy with their circumstances. And like in a lot of ways, and what I do in mediation is I come around the problem another way, revisit the issues, and constantly propose new solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rutsky?
Thank you. That's a very important question. Temperament is key to what judges do. You have to keep an even keel, be calm, cool, and collected. One instance that comes to mind, I had a matter where I was questioning a witness. The witness became belligerent, actually, to the point that court security had to be called. And in that situation, you have to remain calm, continue doing your job, and rely on your training and your experiences to help you get through that situation. The worst thing that you could do is lose your temper or get shaken. So again, you just have to remain calm, keep your temperament even keeled, and handle the situation as best you can. And that's probably the number 1 quality of any judge that I've been in front of, the ability to keep the courtroom in order and effective and efficient.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
Sorry, pardon me. So sure, I've had experiences like this in court. Believe me, since I've been teaching, I've had a lot more. And what I've learned is that, a lot of times when people are uncivil, which, is something that we as lawyers pride ourselves on, we're able to have disagreements and still be friendly with one another. A lot of times when you see that turned around, it's due to something that's going on in that person's life. A lot of times when kids say something nasty to a teacher, it's because of what's going on in their life. So I've found just to take that attitude, to remain professional, to remain calm, and sometimes when you turn that around and kill somebody with a little bit of kindness, you actually make them look a little bad, or sometimes even better yet, they'll come around to respect to more on the back end.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard, you will answer this next question first. What is your experience in working with pretrial services and diversionary programs? Are you supportive of these programs?
I'm absolutely supportive of it. Basically, what I do now is I run mental health court and I run veterans court currently. Prior to this, I ran ARD court and Phoenix court, all of which is pretrial services. So, for example, if we have first-time offenders, they need to get an assessment done and they need to get a CRIN assessment. I make sure that that gets done. I make sure that they don't plea into ARD court. They actually agree to the terms and conditions of ARD. And once they're admitted in, if they successfully complete all the terms and conditions, then they're discharged. That's ARD court. Mental health court, what I do is we get a qualifying diagnosis. That diagnosis comes from JRS. We can do that at the Magisterial District. Once we have that qualifying diagnosis, what we will then do is hold the case in abatement, and we will work out the case at the Magisterial District. That way, it prevents the individual from having to go downtown. It will never have a CC number. It will only ever have an MJ number. And we want to do the same for the Veterans Administration, get the VJO to come in as well and utilize the Aspinwall campus up on the hill. So yes, no, pretrial services are vital. I'm in contact with them daily, and I'm a huge supporter as a way of keeping the Allegheny County Jail from filling up. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch?
Yes, thank you. Absolutely, it is something very important. As a conflict resolution specialist, we're always looking for alternative ways to solve a problem. And certainly that's what pretrial services and the diversionary programs do. There's so many programs. I don't know that people are aware of all the opportunities out there to look for alternative ways, whether it's DUIs and community service, anger management, retail theft cases, certainly the mental health and the veterans court as well that have been discussed. We need to take better use and take better advantage of these programs to help speed up the processes. There are backlogs in the court. Certainly the pandemic has not helped, but to be able to use the diversionary programs, we will be able to get to a better point of having justice that much sooner. And that's the goal that we should all be willing to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rutsky?
Yes, thank you. Diversionary programs are a great tool that magistrates do have available to them. If someone suffers from mental health issues or from addiction, or if we have kids who are at risk of truancy or delinquency, we need to pull them back from the ledge instead of pushing them over. And that can be done at the magistrate's office. If someone is charged with a disorderly conduct or an assault, for example, they can be put into an anger management course. The matter can be continued for 60 or 90 days. If that course is completed, the charges can be dismissed or withdrawn. If someone suffers from addiction, you can put them through counseling or rehabilitation. And you can also work with the Hope Center or the Women's Shelter and Center of Pittsburgh in domestic violence cases for victims and for their aggressors. In Sharpsburg, I'm proud to say that we are one of the few communities that have joined the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program. And as mayor, I'm very proud of that. It means we're taking low-level offenders, diverting them out of the criminal justice system so that they can get the help and tools they need to get their lives back on track. And that's great for judicial economy because it prevents cases from going downtown and it helps people rehabilitate themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
Yeah, I'm heartened to hear everybody saying that they're supporters of the diversionary programs. I'm also not surprised. I mean, it's become over the last several decades sort of the norm of judicial philosophy. And my judicial philosophy in general is that we should be doing the least harm to offenders to ensure consequences, but always the ultimate goal should be their social and personal improvement. So absolutely, I'm in favor of diversionary programs for appropriate candidates, low-level offenders, first-time offenders, when there's some underlying condition that seems to have been a cause of their offense.
Thank you. Mrs. Sazanowski?
Thank you. Yes. And to echo what everyone else is, I unfortunately echo what a lot of people have been saying. Yes, of course, I am very supportive of these programs and services. Allegheny County is well funded in terms of what we do have in terms of these programs and things that are available to both victims and persons charged with a crime. Justice-related services, JRS, was already alluded to. That's a great resource, but unfortunately, a lot of people aren't given access to those programs and to those services until it's too late. For somebody who's actually suffering from a mental health or drug addiction, just a few days, a few weeks is a really, really long time for that person to languish and wait. And there could be other consequences to them, to their families, to the community, and I'm respectful of that. So something I would do as a district judge in our area would be link people who are in need of those services as soon as possible. At their arraignment, that's your first appearance in front of a magisterial district judge where a bond is set. And I have the experience and I've developed relationships in the course of my career to make sure that that gets done.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch, you will get this next question first. As judge, how would you balance a relationship with law enforcement with the rights of the defendant? What steps can a judge take to eliminate undue influence from law enforcement?
Thank you. It's amazing that that's my question, because I was actually asked that question by a constituent last night as to the concerns about impartiality and basically having law enforcement have their thumbs on the scale. So what steps I would take? I certainly am not somebody who has been in the system. I have not been a prosecutor. I've not been a public defender. So I have not taken a side. My role is to come into the process as a referee and to hear both sides fairly and to be neutral. I certainly, I appreciate the work that the police and law enforcement do and respect the efforts that they make every day to go out there and protect and serve the public. But I don't think that they're entitled to not being tested when they're presenting information for warrants, when they're presenting testimony before the court. I would be a fair and neutral magisterial district judge, and I would ensure that law enforcement lives up to their obligations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Rudsky?
Yes, thank you. It's important to keep in mind, as Jess alluded to, that judges are calling balls and strikes. It's no secret that I'm the mayor of Sharpsburg, so I work closely with our police department and have relationships with all of them. I was also raised by a police officer. My father was the chief of police in Sharpsburg. So I do have a great deal of respect for our police officers. But judges and all elected officials, they serve the Commonwealth, they serve the people. And you have to strike a balance. You have to remain impartial. You have to give equal credence and credibility to each side. And I know that sometimes in some situations, people do see police officers hanging out at the magistrate's office. And I think that's what leads to this idea that police officers are hanging out or may have some undue influence on a magistrate, whether that idea is warranted or not. So, it would be my policy not to have my office being a hangout place for officers or any individuals to be hanging out on a day-to-day basis, because it takes away from that vision of independent justice.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
Yeah, well, I also have sort of a background being around police. Again, with 15 years in the local fire departments, I've met a lot of police. I've seen the work that they do. And, I admire how they try to make life easier for what my experience was, firefighters. But that said, I mean, I'm somebody who plays by the rules and tries to be by the book. And I will make life as easy as I can for policemen to do their jobs, in the sense that I'll provide access. I'll even provide access in my home, provided the county administrator will still allow that. But if the police don't have the goods, they don't have the goods. And I'm totally comfortable saying, you have not met your constitutional obligation. You have to go back and try again. And that is the true job of the judge, is to be fair and impartial. So even if we have respect for police officers, we can't be a rubber stamper and have to protect everybody's constitutional rights.
Thank you. Ms. Sazanowski?
I think the most important word that you said there in your question even is balance. You have to make sure that you have that balance. And the person who's elected as a district judge will have to do that every single day. They'll have to walk that line. I do work as an assistant district attorney where I work to protect victims, but I also am the daughter of one of the chief public defenders here in Allegheny County. So a lot of criminal justice issues that are just in vogue now and are being discussed, those are things that I was raised with. Those are things that I grew up hearing about around the dinner table. So I'm very respectful of not only defendants' rights when they come before me, but also law enforcement and how they need to do their job. In the course of my employment, like I said, I reviewed search warrants before they're even presented to a district judge. And that's important for two reasons. My job as an assistant district attorney is to seek justice. It's not to put my thumb on the scale one way or the other, advocate for one side or another. I've already been walking that line, that balance through the course of my career. And that's what makes me a little uniquely suited to do this particular job.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard?
Yes, thank you. I'm the only person here who's had 25 years litigation in the criminal justice system full time. I've been a prosecutor, I've been a defense attorney, I've been a war crimes investigator. I've looked at these issues from every different angle that a person can possibly look at them. What I would say is that I'm not there. Sometimes the appearance of impropriety is every bit as much as actual impropriety. So I agree with the person who spoke before that said that the police shouldn't hang out there. I'm not to be people's friends. I'm there to be a neutral, detached fact finder. I'm there to weigh the evidence and decide what cases can stay at the district magistrates, what evidentiary burden is going to be handled as far as hearsay and the different rules of criminal procedure, what cases should go downtown, what cases can be retained at the magisterial district, what contents are required in the search warrant itself. For example, the police to be searched, the items to be seized. For example, you can't go search a drawer if you're looking for a stolen car, that type of thing. It has to be certified. It has to be, I have to agree to it, because imagine I'm the person whose name is going to be on it at the end of the day. I want to bring my skills and knowledge to that role.
Thank you. Mr. Rutsky, you will be first to answer this next question. How strictly do you believe the rules of evidence should be followed in the magistrates court?
Yeah, so the magistrate court is the ground level of our criminal justice system. It's the court that most individuals will be in front of if they are in front of a court. And sometimes that means people are representing themselves. I think we should draw a distinction between whether these are procedural or substantive rules. If a rule says shall, I don't think that leaves much discretion. But if it's a substantive rule, I think we need to use discretion. Again, most people are coming here unrepresented. We can get that to that in a minute. But there needs to be leeway, there needs to be discretion, a little bit of rule bending. But nevertheless, if someone comes in unrepresented, there are tools available to them, whether that be for a criminal matter through the public defender's office or for a landlord-tenant matter through the neighborhood legal services. So matters can be continued so that people can obtain counsel and be represented before the magistrate.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
The simple answer is that the rules of criminal procedure need to be followed. That's the long and the short of it. And there are allowances in Pennsylvania case law for assisting pro se unrepresented people in coming to understanding what, or coming to identify their claims and helping them to make sense of it a little bit. But you know, and that's fine, and that's something I'll be happy to do. But the rules are the rules are the rules, and a judge's job is to follow them, and a judge's job is to follow them even if he or she doesn't like them. And if those rules are to be changed, they're to be changed by other people than a magisterial district judge.
Thank you. Ms. Sazanowski?
I do agree the rules should be followed. The rules are made for a reason. They're so that everyone operates with the same advantages and disadvantages when they come before a district judge. Now, that being said, I do not believe that the rules should be used as a tool, as a gotcha to hamstring certain people who may not have a particular background, who have the constitutional right to represent themselves at a district judge level and may choose to do so. No one can get in the way of that right. That being said, if a person chooses to assert that right, I can do nothing to prevent that. But I can make it clear that someone who is not familiar with the rules, is not familiar with how a courtroom should proceed, with how a preliminary hearing, for example, should go on, how evidence is admitted, I would not use that to their disadvantage. I would make sure, I would advise them that an attorney should be available. I expect that there will be a question about the availability of counsel, and I would hope to speak on that a little bit later.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard?
Thank you. Yeah, it's my response to this would be, it's one thing to have read the rules. It's another thing to have applied the rules in a variety of ways for over 25 years full time in all the various courts that I've worked in. When it comes to applying the rules, there is a certain level of discretion that a judge can do. For example, in a preliminary hearing, the defendant has a right to either have a hearing or to waive the hearing without a trial. A lot of times, there's nothing worse than seeing cases that should not be coming downtown come downtown. And we see district attorneys sending them down all the time, unfortunately. It wastes a lot of resources. It wastes a lot of time, especially when you have magistrates that may not be up on the current law in what is required. For example, the hearsay standard, it has changed. So if you don't know the rules of hearsay and you don't know that the rule just recently changed and the Rickert rule is no longer in effect, you're going to send a case down that's going to be fatally flawed. And that's going to be worked to the detriment of the entire court system because we're going to have to be down there trying to fix it when it gets to us. That's not right. And you need somebody who is experienced and is going to apply the current standards and be up on them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch, same question to you.
Thank you. And actually, I encounter this issue regularly when I sit as an arbitrator because the rules in arbitration are the same issues of whether you're able to have the flexibility in applying the rule or apply the rule strictly. The goal of an evidentiary issue is to ascertain the truth and secure a just determination. That's actually the goal of the court in having a case. We want to have findings of fact that are based on evidence and that we can justify. So you have to evaluate the evidence you have. In cases before the Magisterial District Court, that means sometimes you have to evaluate whether the evidence is in a proper form, how it's presented, who it's coming from, and because you don't have perhaps two litigators, two experienced attorneys, both presenting the cases, you have to dig a little bit deeper. So I certainly don't want to see violations of the evidentiary rules, but in order to ascertain the truth and again, secure a just determination, there has to be some flexibility in what we're looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will go to Mr. Turner first. What factors are considered in granting and setting bail amounts for defendants? What do you believe is the primary consideration? And how would you reform the cash bail system?
Sorry, muting issues. So again, I look to the rules of criminal procedure and they set forth the system of determining whether or not bail is appropriate and what type of bail is appropriate. And you look at all factors. I mean, there's literally a long list in the rules and it says all other relevant factors to whether or not somebody will return to the next hearing. So to understand bail, you really have to understand its purpose. I think some people think bail is meant as some sort of punishment, and it's not. It's what can you do to feel ensured that the person will continue to participate in the criminal process, the criminal law process. And so I don't know that I would, I as a judge would not reform the law. That's really not my role. But there are lots of ways short of money bail that you can creatively come up with ways to find a sweet spot where the person you'll be insured will come back, but you're not punishing them any more than is absolutely necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sazanowski?
I fundamentally believe bail is not meant to punish somebody pre-trial. It's not meant to incarcerate them before their trial occurs. It's certainly not a way to keep someone who's poor, someone who can't afford a cash bail in jail. Now, there are only certain factors that a district judge can consider in setting any kind of bail, and I would follow those. Some of those include safety to the community, whether a person will appear at the next listing. Those are all factors that I would consider. It's unconstitutional to do otherwise. And that's something that's important to me. The primary consideration should always be, will that person appear at the next listing? And that's what we're concerned with. There are people who would like to maybe change that at a statewide level. If that change happens, I would be on board with that change. I would comply with the law as it's written. It's not my place to step into a legislator's role. And I think it's important as a district judge to maintain that kind of composure and maintain that role.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard?
Right, thank you. I think this is where we see a lot of having read the rules and actually having applied the rules. As a public defender, I'm always fighting bond motions. It's been for the last 25 years that I've been on the receiving end of these bonds. Now, as a magistrate, what you've got to do is you've got to weigh out community safety and the person's appearance at the next hearing date. Now, Rule 523 gives us a lot of guidance on how that should be. What is the person's OGS, the offense gravity score for the particular offense? What's the PRS? What's the person's prior record score? Do they have a history of fleeing? Do they regularly return to court when they're supposed to? Are they a danger to the community? What are the effects on the community? That's an important aspect as well. There are things that we can do to prevent the Allegheny County Jail having a lot of pre-trial detention, and that's non-monetary conditions. You have to do this in order to remain free, or we can postpone the case for you to get counsel, whatever the case may be. But we can do EHM, electric home monitoring. We can do TAD bracelets for alcohol issues. There's a lot of tools that we have in the tool bag, and I look forward to applying them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch?
Thanks. So Barry must have read my vote411.org post, because I was absolutely using the toolbox expression for my answer for this question. We have a lot of tools. Some of it does include attorney representation. Some of it includes evaluation of all the factors and looking at alternatives. So what we need, again, is to go back to the question of who has the experience in employing alternative resolutions, who has the judgment that can weigh the competing interests involved here. Bail is not supposed to be punitive. It's really not. But unfortunately, there's been a lack of creativity and a lack of willingness to use the toolbox to find alternatives to imposing cash bail. So I certainly will make an effort to explore the middle ground, see what, again, alternatives we have, and evaluate what the charging decisions are from the DA to look for those alternatives to cash bail. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Rudsky?
Thank you. It's a great question. I think criminal justice reform has become a theme of this year's judicial cycle. As the other candidates pointed out, bail is not meant to be punitive. It's to guarantee someone's appearance unless they are such a threat to society that you would deny bail in a homicide charge, for example. But nevertheless, we have seen that the use of cash bail across the county varies from MDJ to MDJ. Some use it 50% of the time, some use it in no instances. And that's a factor of which communities they are serving. But nevertheless, I would look at the risk assessment tool. I would use that as an MDJ, but I would also consider the defendant's ability to pay and whether or not they can afford cash bail. It has been used as a way, or in a way that disproportionately impacts people of color and poor people, and they sit in jail or have charges held against them that they plead to in order to get out of jail to a crime that they're not guilty of.
Thank you. This next question, Ms. Sazanowski, you will answer this one first. And this is a question from the Fox Chapel students. Since the magistrate deals specifically with truancy cases, how do you plan to support both the school and the students who may not be regularly attending school?
I think the best way that you can support and encourage students and their families in this way is to treat every single person on an individual basis and not as a case or not as just a number. I recognize I do have 2 children. I have a family, and I'm cognizant that the decisions that a magisterial district judge makes impact the entire family. For someone who may be not appearing rather at school, there could be a constellation of reasons why. There's more often than not, it's not just because they don't feel like it. Sometimes there are other issues going on at home. I'm sensitive to that. I recognize that tagging a parent for a fine every time a child doesn't appear at school isn't constructive. It doesn't do anything to better that family, better that student, better the community at all. And I would treat every case on a case-by-case basis and try to treat not only the student, but the family with empathy and the dignity that they deserve.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard?
Yes, thank you. I suspect I'm the only person here who's done juvenile court for several years, and I have a lot of ideas on that. I think that, the first thing we need to do with truancy is resolve it at the lowest level possible. We have to have communication with the parents. We've got to do it at the schools. We got to do it where it's occurring, to take that person and explain to them the situation. Now, as far as juveniles in the legal system itself, some easy things that we can do is we can get away from carrying 4-point felonies into adulthood for the rest of your life. We can put a maximum range on for how long those 4-point felonies can stay on an adult or on a juvenile's record. I think we can expand consent decrees. Consent decrees are first-time offender programs whereby if you satisfy all the terms and conditions of everything that you're supposed to do, you have no record and you can say for the rest of your life that you've never been charged with a crime. It's important to remember that juveniles aren't convicted, but they're found delinquent. Although it doesn't travel with them into adulthood unless it's a 4-point felony generally, those cases should be handled in such a way that we should not be criminalizing things that juveniles do, things that we've all did when we were kids, and we need to change the law in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch?
Yes, thanks very much. I think this is similar to the law enforcement question and your average citizen. My role is to be the impartial hearing person in the middle of the two sides and understand where they're coming from. So my solution to the issue and how I would navigate is to ensure that we have a lot of communication, a lot of conversation, a lot of interaction to understand what the issues might be. You know, kids who are truant have a lot more issues than just they don't want to go to school. And certainly my young adult daughters, we can flash back to when they did not want to go to school at times. So sometimes there's transportation issues, there's housing issues. Girls sometimes have issues that keep them home because of a lack of resources for the feminine hygiene supplies that they need. Kids have trauma in their lives and there's bullying at school. So we need to have conversation and get to the heart as to what the issues are. There's alternative programs, there's community resources, there's the family division diversionary programs. There's lots of ways that we can navigate once we get behind what the issues are. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Rudsky?
Yes, thank you. Like David, I did teach very briefly. I taught for a year. I had a fellowship that was administered by the Fulbright program. I taught in Austria. I was in 2 high schools. So I know that there's a correlation between academic success and being in the classroom. In my law practice, we represent a local school district. So I know that the school does a great job. If there are 3 unexcused absences, the administration tries to work with the student and teachers and parents. But if it's habitual, then charges are filed. It's a summary offense. In those situations, I think the magistrate still needs to work with the student and the parent. You need to sit down, implore upon the student the importance of going to school, upon the parent as well. You can continue the matter for 60 or 90 days. If there are no more continuing issues, then you can have the charges dismissed or they can be withdrawn by the school district. But again, I think it's about working with the student, giving them a path, letting them know you're there to listen, working with the parent, and just continuing helping them with their success.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
Yeah, I've worked at school districts where chronic absenteeism have been 20%, 30%, sometimes higher. And I can tell you that the single greatest predictor of student failure before graduation is absenteeism, truancy. So this is something I want to work on a great deal, and I want to the extent I can, cooperate with the school district, be in the school district, be working with kids early on and identifying it as early as we can. Because what's happened to date is that there have been a lot of consequences offered when students are 18 in their senior year, and by that point, it's way too late. So we need to get in early, and the 2 keys to getting through truancy issues are student buy-in and parent buy-in. You need them both. It takes more than one time in court. It takes some regular interactions with folks to understand what their issues are, why school isn't a realistic possibility. Has there been a family problem with school in the past? You work through these issues, get the students to buy in, the parents to buy in, and then you start to see some results in truancy.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard, you will answer this next question first. What factors are the most relevant to be considered when determining whether or not to grant an order of protection? Which ones would you give the most weight and why?
Right. Obviously, when you're doing protection from abuse, as a magistrate, you have the ability to issue an emergency protection from abuse order. And what that is basically it's an order that allows for the person to remain free of any kind of a harassment from a family member or intimate partner. And it's good up until the time that a magistrate or until the common pleas court convenes. Now, the most important factors I would look at would be the serious nature of the alleged offense. I would look toward a continuing course of conduct, things that have been occurring between the parties in the past. Am I familiar with the parties? What is there an alternative accommodation that would be possible for the two to be separated? Will the safety of the person seeking the protection from abuse be safeguarded as well? So those are all factors that go into the balancing of an individual's freedom versus public safety for the individual who's seeking the PFA.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch?
Certainly. So again, when I represent victims of domestic violence, some of the very factors that we're looking at are these same issues. The severity. What is the abuse? Is it psychological? Is it physical? Has it landed them in the hospital? Have they certainly been evicted at certain points? And what's the frequency of the abuse? Was this an unfortunate encounter of a date gone bad, or is there a long-standing relationship here where there's been abuse over time? So looking at all of those factors. The other things that I look at is who else it affects. So unfortunately, there have been cases where it's mother-son or father-daughter, and there's familial relationships that you need to take into account as well when you're looking at order of protection. Again, it's an individualized case assessment. The cases are very hard. They require a lot of understanding and empathy as you work through the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rutsky?
Yes, thank you. As has been pointed out, I think you need to look to the nature of the relationship between the parties. There are very specific rules to this. And in addition to that, you need to look at the nature of the injuries, as pointed out, whether it's psychological, mental, take all of the factors into consideration. It's very important for these emergency PFAs in downtown in the Court of Common Pleas. They are no longer given out after the morning hours. So if someone is a victim of an aggressor, they need to come to their local magistrate in order to seek that PFA. Another important factor is after that PFA is issued, it needs to be served upon the aggressor in order to be effective. And then at which point it's effective until 8 o'clock the next morning. So it's a vital factor. It's why magistrates should be full-time. In the event the magistrate is in the office, then the victim will be at the mercy of their aggressor. And I've committed to being a full-time magistrate in order to give more access to anyone, any constituent or individual coming to the courtroom.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
Yes, and I'm committed to being a full-time magistrate as well. And it's an interesting issue, these emergency protection from abuse orders, because they are ex parte. There's one side there and one side not. It's an unusual system where we don't provide notice to the other side, and as a result, most of these emergency protection from abuse orders are granted to some extent. So I think the judge's real job is to make sure that the injuries alleged rise to the appropriate level of issuing a protection from abuse order on an emergency basis that will be put to higher stringent standards shortly when it gets to the Common Pleas Court, and then also to make sure that that the relief in place is appropriate to provide for the safety of the people until that next court hearing.
Thank you. Ms. Sazanowski?
Thank you. I do have a bit of a unique perspective with regard to protection from abuse orders. As a prosecutor in the domestic violence unit here in Allegheny County, there are only 5 prosecutors who've been promoted to handle these kinds of cases. And as part of my job there, we would handle ICC violations, so indirect criminal contempt. When someone does violate a protection from abuse order, they do face incarceration as a possible consequence. Now, the factors to consider in granting a protection from abuse order, things that you would give the most weight would be the safety of the party that's seeking it. For me, also things to look out would be escalation. That's something that you see as a pattern, you see as a frequency. Are there many ICC violations, indirect criminal contempt violations? Have orders been violated in the past? Has this person's safety been threatened in a pattern that seems to be at first on the phone, maybe not in person, then it escalates to be in person? Domestic violence is about 2 things. It's about power and it's about control. And those can manifest in a multiple of different ways. I'm familiar with all of those ways.
Thank you. This next question, Ms. Lynch, you'll answer it first. And since it was mentioned about full-time status as a magistrate, I'll ask this question from the Fox Chapel students. The magistrate is paid roughly around $93,000 a year. While all the candidates have pledged to be full-time, what does full-time mean to you?
These students are so smart. I was actually going to take time out of my answer to the prior question at this point to address this very issue. They're so smart. So for me, it means the only job, and it is the only job I will have. And in some ways, it's an easy decision in my case because the Code of Judicial Conduct precludes me from serving as an arbitrator and a mediator in other cases. So I will have to close my practice, and I will do that happily so that I'm available 24/7 all the time to serve the community, whether I'm wearing my robe and down in the courthouse adjudicating cases, or whether I'm out in the community being at events, working to learn more about the community issues, partnering with local organizations to better serve and understand the community. So for me, it's about avoiding, obviously avoiding the judicial conduct prohibitions by closing my practice, but also avoiding the conflict from the appearance of impropriety or things where if I were to engage in a law practice that could lead to conflicts that make me unfit to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rutsky?
Thank you. I've, like all of the other candidates, committed to being a full-time magistrate. In my current role in my private practice. Again, I mentioned that we represent a local school district, so that would probably preclude me from continuing to work in my current role. But being full-time means being there 5 days a week, at least 8 hours a day. I live 3 blocks from the courthouse. I will be there every day, whether my staff likes that or not. But also it's about changing procedures in the courtroom. I know there's one magistrate in Allegheny County who holds night court. I will seek permission from the president judge of the Court of Common Pleas to hold night court in my office. And this is for working class folks, and it's for students in a delinquency matter or truancy matter. You can start the day after the school day ends so that you don't have to take a student out of instructional classroom time. And for working class people in traffic matters or non-traffic matters, they don't have to burn a sick day or a personal day. They don't have to lose a day's wages. I've made a commitment to staggering cases over a period of time so that they're not stacked and you've got this cattle call. And also, if possible, continuing virtual hearings. And that's going to take extra time and extra energy and extra effort, and I've committed to that.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
Yeah, I've also committed to doing this full time. And to me, you know, when I got into teaching, I did so with the hopes of being able to teach in the Fox Chapel School District. I wanted to come back to the area because I've served, you know, all of our communities as a fireman. When I got into working in the school district, I've served children from all of our communities. And so, you know, this will be a way for me to follow up on that commitment, even though it will mean that I step back from teaching. So that will be a regret, but I will be heartened by the fact that I'll be able to work with kids and, in fact, to work with kids who are facing difficulties, which is something I've done a whole lot of working in schools with high populations of at-risk students. The one question I would ask other people to consider or voters to consider is, yes, we're going to be there 5 days a week. This job was done in 2 or 3 days a week before, perhaps. What's going to be done by the magistrate during that extra time? And as I've told you, my commitment is to be working with people who've had bad outcomes in court one-on-one to try to help them not come to court a second time.
Thank you. Ms. Sazanowski?
Thank you. Yes. I've said since the beginning of my campaign, full-time job means 2 things to me. It means this will be a full-time job for me if I were elected as our district judge. And it also means it will be my only job. Let me say that again. This will be a full-time job for me, and this will be my only job. And I'm proud to say that I've been committed to that way, that philosophy since the beginning of my campaign. I've heard from a lot of people on the doors, knocking doors, that after hours availability is something that's important to them. Access to the magisterial district judge, whether it's on the phone at night, whether it's in some kind of after a traditional workday or on the weekends availability for hearings. That's important. That's something that I would like to bring to the district in that capacity. I'm already doing that in my current employment. I approve search warrants at night, at all hours of the night. The police will call and they'll ask for advice. And I'd love to bring that availability and that transparency to this office. I'd like to continue that.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard?
Yes, thank you. As a public defender, I haven't had a private practice in over 20 years, so I have no private practice to shutter or to start. No, I will be a full-time magistrate, and it's interesting to hear the jingo. Everybody seems to say the same thing, but what are you going to fill your time with? The docket is what the docket is. I have a plan for actually utilizing the district magistrate office more effectively. What I alluded to earlier was I want to have evening hours and I want to have weekend hours. I want to have mental health court reviews. I want to have veterans court reviews. I want to get drug courts streamlined into the district magisterial district when possible. Now, there are some cases that have to go downtown. I get that. But the cases that I can keep at the district magistrate, I can have JRS in the district magistrate's office. I can have the VJO there. I can have the members of the drug court. We can do the assessment that's required to start a service plan. We can put these people on service plans. We can review these cases every week or 2 weeks or every 4 weeks as the person progresses with what they agree to do to satisfy the terms and conditions of me holding the case at the magisterial district. That's what full-time means.
Thank you. This next question, Mr. Rutsky will answer first, and staying on the topic of the court procedures and efficiency. What have been the most effective methods for improving court procedures and efficacy? Efficiency. What other methods would you suggest?
Sure, I touched upon this a little bit in the last question. Again, I would introduce the night court. And this allows an opportunity, again, for people to avoid burning a vacation day or a personal day to come to court in the evening for a traffic violation or a non-traffic matter. And the same goes for students. If a student is truant, of course, we do not want to take them out of the classroom. So that's another reason to have these evening courts so kids can come after the school day. I would commit to case staggering instead of stacking. So right now, a lot of magistrates schedule all of their matters at 10 o'clock in the morning. So you have 15, 20 people, maybe even more showing up. It causes a long delay for individuals. If you stagger cases, you can schedule some at 10, some at 10:30, some at 11, some at 11:30. In addition, Barry talks about filling time. You can do workshops. You can help people if they need to learn about the clean slate law or for expungements or a fine and fee workshop. So those are all things that we could do to fill our time as a full-time magistrate.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
Yeah, I think there's lots of things that we can be doing, and we can always be working towards it. One is I think we can provide citizens with an accurate time for their hearings instead of the catcall procedures that I know as an attorney showing up at a magistrate, it's very frustrating to be there at 9 o'clock and not have anything happen until 10:30. I also believe in the concept of night court. I think that benefits our citizens. I think that benefits our police. I think that saves taxpayer dollars by allowing police to schedule hearings whenever they want to. I believe that we can work to increase the use of technology in the courts, particularly with non-hearing conferences. I'd like to work to call civil clients before hearings to see if there isn't some possibility of a settlement before we even come to court. And the last thing, which goes to truancy, is I would like to have courts in the schools for students who are having difficult behavioral situations in schools and truancy, so we're not pulling them out of class very much if we need to at all to address truancy.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Sazanowski?
Yes, I would echo the importance of staggering the case listings. It is very frustrating, and it's not efficient to have everybody appear at the exact same time for one scheduled hearing in the morning. And that's why I'm not beholden to the old way of doing things. Everybody who maybe has no experience at a magisterial district judge will say, well, on this day we do X, on that day we do X. I don't think those kinds of theme days really have any value. They don't add anything. I have relationships with the public defender's office, with the district attorney's office, with court administration, that if there were cases that need to be heard, they need to be expedited, like detainer cases, people who are incarcerated waiting for their magistrate case to be heard and to be dealt with, to be sent to either the Court of Common Pleas or be disposed of in front of the district judge. Those are relationships I would rely on, and I would pick up the phone and I would say, we need to get all these parties together virtually, which we've all seen that has worked in the past year and change. I've done trials virtually. I've done non-jury trial suppressions, all kinds of things virtually. That's possible in this new world, in this pandemic world. And that's something that I would encourage.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard?
Yes, thank you. There's a lot of things that I think that we can do to make things more efficient. Our community is hurting as a result of COVID. We're seeing cases in mental health court that we've never seen before. We're seeing people that have never been in trouble before that are coming. Our county, our community is hurting, and it's hurting in a bad way. What we need to do is we need to keep the cases out of the mental health court system. I currently represent every single mental health client in Allegheny County who's in mental health court, and also the veterans. What we need to do is we need to find, in conjunction with the district attorney's office, who is actually structuring this way, we need to find a way to resolve these cases in such a way that they don't have to come downtown. Currently, under the system, I don't get the case until after formal arraignment, which means clerk of courts are involved, judges are involved, district attorneys are involved, criminal defense attorneys are involved. There's a whole panoply, tens of thousands of dollars involved. If we handle this properly at the district magisterial level, we won't have to we will save our resources for the cases that do have to come downtown, not the crap that's coming down now. And that's a way that we can save taxpayer dollars, and that's what I'm going to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch?
Yes, there are three things that I think we can do to improve the court efficiency. The first thing is access to legal representation. So many people simply cannot afford a lawyer, whether it's in a civil case or in a criminal case where they're assigned a public defender. We need to improve that access, and there's certainly programs and efforts underway in the larger community and the government programs to do that. The second thing is we need to have evaluation of the community's understanding of these issues. We need to evaluate the best practices, hear from the staff of the court, the bar, the attorneys that practice, the police, the schools, the whole community, to understand what's working, where are there gaps, do we need to improve the website, do we need to have better resources actually in the lobby and the courtroom itself. And then the third thing is to look at the scheduling issues. Is it possible to have early court hours? Is it possible to have late court hours or weekend hours? Continue with the virtual hearing programs. There are definitely lots of things that we can do to improve the process, starting with the access to legal representation, evaluation and community education, and then the scheduling matters. Thank you.
Thank you. This will be our last question before we move on to closing statements. And this is also coming from the students. Currently, Mr. Turner, you'll be the first to answer. Currently, all the candidates running are white. Magistrates will have to be judges for all people. What are your plans to address implicit bias and racial disparities known to exist in our legal system?
So, boy, that's a loaded question for 1 minute. Here's what I would tell you. I don't know that I can answer the whole system in 1 second, but I can talk to you about me. I come knowing that, we all have biases of certain types about all sorts of things. And it's not just race. It can be about neighborhood, right? It can be about class. It can be about all sorts of things. And, it's been interesting in hearing the conversations about police training. You've started to hear people say, well, police training, we've done it. And it's really a question of humanity. And I think that that's something that I've learned humbly through working in a variety of different school systems. As a teacher, I teach you regardless of where you come from. I'm looking for the humanity in you. I'm looking for personal growth in you. And that's all I can say that I can offer to the best of my ability as a magistrate judge, is to try to judge you individually and force any biases that may exist out, focusing on humanity. Thank you.
Ms. Sazanowski.
I think it's important to note that the question does inherently recognize that there are implicit biases, and that this field, as you mentioned, everybody who is running for this district judge position is white. Overall, magisterial district judges in Allegheny County, there are 46. Only 9 of those are women. That's less than 20%. And at the common pleas court level, only 29% of those are women. It's not much better. In this day and age, that's something that needs to change. The judiciary at all levels should represent the people that are governed by it. It should be more representative of our district. Something in a specific way to do that is to recognize that things like when we were talking about setting a bond, setting a bail, the risk assessment tool can't take into account, it can't account for some of the implicit biases that are in that data, that people of color tend to be arrested more for low-level crimes. That's where a district judge steps in. That's why we don't use a computer to set somebody's bail. We let a judge do it and insert their own personal beliefs in there. They can take that data apart instead of using it as a rote tool.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard?
Yes, thank you. Briefly, I grew up in the city, 12 years, Pittsburgh Public School. I graduated from Oliver on the north side. So I come from a diverse background. I'm the only candidate with 25 years of full-time practice in the criminal justice system, of which 20 years was with the public defender's office. Currently, I represent every client who's currently in the mental health court system. That involves the whole spectrum of different people. And I have several transgender people that I represent. I have people that scan the whole horizon of different ethnicities and beliefs and political beliefs and the whole range. As a public defender, you don't have the luxury of being able to take a case or to reject a case. Every case that comes through that door is looking for quality representation. And I'm the person that they see. And when I see them, we talk, we discuss the case. I don't see Black people, I don't see women, I don't see men. I see a person that's in need, who's trying to keep the power of government from coming down on them. And that's what I've committed my life to solving. And that's what I want to do as district magistrate, as a neutral fact finder. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch?
Thank you. The key to understanding implicit bias is to be aware. You have to be aware and have an open mind and perspective to understand that there could be biases there. And then your other tools of your judgment, your values, your compassion, your empathy can come in and counteract it. So I'll tell you a story. When I was working as an attorney and I was volunteering at the Martin Luther King School through a mentorship program, and I was working with a reading program with a fifth grader. And at the same time, I had a fifth grader at O'Hara Elementary School. And the differences could not have been more stark. At the O'Hara Elementary School, we were debating whether we should have carrots or cupcakes for the school holiday party. And at Martin Luther King School, we were trying to decide whether we could have actual lunch for the children, whether they had to eat chips and crackers and things during the social time. So it was just, the disparity was huge. And it's that awareness that I bring to understanding where there might be implicit bias and work to combat it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rudsky?
Yeah, implicit bias is called implicit because it's in all of us, as just pointed out. We need to be a little introspective, and we need to learn, and we need to educate ourselves. I have taken a continuing legal education course in implicit bias. I thought it was a great course. I would actually I'd make it a policy that any court staffer that I'm working with also takes that course, whether they're a lawyer or not. Within our police department, after the events of George Floyd's murder, we did multiple implicit bias trainings. So again, it's about opening eyes, learning how our brain creates shortcuts and how that is an implicit bias, something that we do subconsciously and we're not aware of. So it's about raising education, educating ourselves. We need individuals from all walks of life, but also allies who stand with them. I've been an ally. I am the endorsed candidate by Stonewall and Gertrude Stein. In Sharpsburg, I've advocated for the Human Rights Ordinance, and I've also helped elevate voices of other candidates. I recently helped break a tie as the mayor to appoint our first Black council person who also is a female to council. So that all goes to implicit bias and educating ourselves.
Thank you. We'll now move to closing statements. Ms. Lynch, you will go first with your closing statement.
Thank you very much. And again, my sincere thanks to the League of Women Voters and Ms. Klein's class for the questions and hosting this forum. My aim has always been to help people, sometimes using my legal skills in and out of the courtroom, other times by rolling up my sleeves and getting to work in the streets and the boardrooms and the schools. My family will tell you that I am not afraid of hard work and that once I commit to a project, I see it through. And speaking of the family, I want to thank my husband, J.R. Known, and my daughters, Allison and Lindsay, for their very hard work on my campaign. They will also tell you that I speak plainly and act authentically. I use common sense and listen, and I'm a fair and transparent leader who happens to be certified in conflict resolution to solve difficult problems. And we know that solving difficult problems is what the Magisterial District Court is all about. These are not complex statutory problems with novel legal theories. These are problems that are difficult because they're personal and they require much skill and effort and judgment to deal with and understand. And at the end of the day, these are the problems that are personal to you, our neighbors, and I respectfully request your consideration on May 18th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wingard?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I wish that we could do this again before the election, but we heard today a lot about the jingle of full-time and how people are going to do full-time. Well, let me tell you, I have a vision for the future, and the vision for the future is not what it currently is in the district magistrates, other than one. What I propose to do is a 5-point plan. My 5-point plan involves bringing mental health into the district magistrates, bringing veterans into the magistrate, bringing drug courts, streamlining it out so the person doesn't have to wait 6 months in the county jail until I can get the case under the current system. We're going to do that at the district magistrate level. We're going to do that on mental health. We're going to do that on veterans. We're going to do that for drug cases. As far as unity in the community, I'm not Democrat. I'm not Republican. I'm not trying to get endorsements to show that people like me better than you and any of that. I'm not an establishment person at all. Haven't asked for an endorsement. Will not do that. As far as community safety, that is a priority with me. Individual rights, I practiced it for 20 years. That's what I've committed my life to doing. I think that I'm the best magisterial district candidate, the only one with 25 years of experience and 25 years in the criminal justice system actually doing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Sazanowski?
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting us today. This is a very, very important race. It's one for a magisterial district judge candidate. It's often the only interaction that people have with the justice system, whether it's on the civil or criminal side. And I'm running because I want to bring my experience and my level of commitment to this job, and I want to put it to work for a community that I love. I have a unique experience. I've practiced in front of almost every district magistrate in Allegheny County. There are 46 of those, only 9 are women. So if you are able to bring that unique experience and contribute something to your community, I believe you have a duty to do so. And that's why I'm out here doing that. My practical courtroom experience, I'm actually a trial attorney. It's not something I'd have to read about or have to learn how to do. In terms of signing search warrants and reviewing those, I've done hundreds of those in the course of my employment. I'm very comfortable doing that, and that's something that I would put to work. It would be my sole focus. It would be a full-time job and my only job as well, because that's what I believe our community deserves. I'm a lifelong O'Hara resident. I'm a mom and a wife, and I'm invested in the community, and I want to do all I can to see it prosper.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
Thank you to all those who've hosted this forum, and thanks to the candidates for this informative discussion. Again, I'm viewing the district magistrate position in maybe an old-fashioned kind of way. Magistrates used to not necessarily, magistrates are put in place when there weren't lawyers around necessarily or judges around to hear cases. So I want to do what all of us will do. You're hearing a whole lot of the same things about us as lawyers and what we do in the courtroom. What I'm really concentrating on, and I'll do that, but what I'm concentrating on is a system outside of the courtroom where the magistrate can really be a member of the community, working with people on consistent follow-up with people who've had trouble in the courts. I don't believe that justice can result from one time in court. And I haven't seen the kind of positive development in people result from just one court appearance. And I'd like to change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rutsky?
Thank you again to the League and to all of the candidates speaking here today and everyone who's going to be watching. It is great to have this forum so that all of us can be in one place at one time. With that being said, I want to take my legal experience as a general practice attorney. I've handled a wide variety of matters over my practice over the course of the last 8 years. Before that, I clerked for a firm in Sharpsburg and interned with the DA's office. But I also want to take my experiences as a public servant, again, being boots on the ground, finger on the pulse, learning what works and what doesn't work in our communities, to bring restorative, fair, and accessible justice to Aspinwall, Blawnox, Fox Chapel, Indidana, O'Hara, and Sharpsburg. I think it's a very important role. Magistrates should make themselves accessible, and they should be transparent and diligent, and I venture to do that as an elected official, and I will bring that same commitment to the magistrate's office. And for me, it's about impact. I want to go from helping the 3,500 residents of my hometown, I'm a 5th generation Sharpsburger, to the 30,000 residents of our school district, and I humbly ask for your support and for your vote.
Thank you. And On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Greater Pittsburgh, I would like to thank all of our candidates for participating in this forum. I'd also like to remind voters that you can obtain more information about these candidates and all the candidates that will appear on your specific ballot by going to vote411.org and putting in your address. In addition, Jen Klein and her students, with the help of the media class, have created a video encouraging students and community members to use Vote 411 and to promote this forum. So a huge thank you goes out to her and her AP government students for their active participation in this forum and in this election. Don't forget, the primary is May 18th. A reminder that there are a number of questions on this year's ballot that all Pennsylvania voters, regardless of party affiliation, may vote on. These concern amendments to the PA Constitution and some Allegheny County issues. You can find an explanation of all these ballot questions on our website, lwvpgh.org. Thank you for your attention.